Welcome to the Kennedy Report, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first live stream with this new channel. I'm just learning all the software, and so hopefully it's looking good. I've been playing around with the green screen situation. I think I've got it down pretty good. If there's a problem, please let me know in the chat. I see it's pretty bumping. Kathy G says, "God bless the SSPX." Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Society of St. Pius X today. There has been a lot of talk about the SSPX. By the way, I think my audio is good. If you can't hear it, please let me know in the chat, but I think it's fine. We're going to talk about the SSPX. There have been a lot of videos put out about the society lately. There have been a lot of articles written about the society. I'm confused that at this point, 50 years after the Second Vatican Council, 50 years since the establishment of the SSPX, 34 years since the consecration of the four bishops by Marcel Lefebvre and Bishop Castromeyer, that there are still people who are, I hate to use the term misinformation because, Big Brother and the Biden administration and whatever, they use that term all the time to just sort of denigrate political opponents, but I need to use that term. I don't understand the misinformation about the SSPX. It's strange to me. I just, I can't understand it. Anyway, so before I get into this, I want to talk about two things. One, if you're not familiar with the story of St. Philip Neri, I was actually listening to a podcast today. About St. Philip Neri with my kids. And there's a story of a woman who went to St. Philip Neri for confession, and she went for advice and confession. Apparently, this woman, her husband had told her that she needed to kick her gossip habit. No comment. And she went to St. Philip Neri, and he basically said, yeah, you got to kick your gossip habit. It's really bad. It's a really bad sin. And she said, I see what you're saying, Father Neri, or Father Philip, whatever he be called. But, it's just a little bit of idle talk amongst friends. I don't see how it could be that bad. I mean, we're just talking about words. It's not as if I'm killing someone or something like that. And St. Philip Neri said, okay, if that's what you think, that's fine. But I'll only absolve you if you do this a certain penance. And she said, what's that? And the penance was that she was to go to the market and find a chicken to bring back to him that he was going to roast, because he loved to roast chicken, I guess. And he said, but the thing is, by the time you get the chicken to me, and this is part of your penance, so you have to do it. By the time you get the chicken to me, I want you to have plucked every feather off that chicken by the time you bring it to me. She said, well, this is strange, but okay, this is what I'll do. So by the time she gets to St. Philip Neri, she's walked through the streets of Rome from the market to where his church was, and brings him the chicken, and it's plucked and it's ready for roasting. And he says, great, thank you so much. I'm so glad you brought me this chicken. And he says, now to complete your penance, what I want you to do is I want you to go and find every single feather that you've plucked off of that chicken and bring those to me as well. She says, I can't, that's impossible. I mean, by this point, I've plucked all these feathers. They have flown all over the city. I mean, think of the people that have walked on them, the wind that's blown them away, and so on and so forth. And she finally got it. And he said, that's what gossip is. Once it's out there, you can't take it back. So she stopped. She realized what gossip was and how terrible it was. And she understood that she should have sorrow for her sins. The reality is that the Society of St. Pius X is a Catholic society of apostolic life with Catholic priests who have Catholic sacraments, Catholic ordination, and are under the auspices of the Roman Catholic Church. When we spread information about them that is false, it gets out there like these feathers in this story, and it's impossible to take the bad information back. I personally have been, virtually excommunicated from people's lives for coming out as a Society of St. Pius X attendee and proponent and defender. I know many people who this has happened. I've been calumnied by priests, multiple priests. I've had strange meetings with vicars of dioceses about this. I have seen the strangest things and the most egregious things have been said about the SSPX that are just plain false. And I have seen it destroy people's personal lives. I have seen people that I never would have expected get whipped up into a frenzy in this weird anti-SSPX nonsense to the point where they don't realize who they're hurting. Now, some people may say, well, that's all well and good, but people have been hurt by people who associated with the Society of St. Pius X. And I'm sure that's true because wherever there are human beings, there will be sin, except for, I guess, the Virgin Mary. Please don't take that as a theological truism, just a general statement. So, yeah, I'm sure people have had bad experiences, but that doesn't justify the things that have been said. The other day, I was watching the Matt Fradd debate, and I thought about doing a, oh, goodness gracious, there's someone in the chat here. I thought about doing a response to the actual debate that Matt Fradd held on his channel. But it's like an hour and a half long, and I realized if I did a breakdown of that, I'd probably, never actually get my day job done. So I decided not to. Instead, I decided to sort of put together the information that I have thought about for a lot of years now and sort of disseminate this into a comprehensive way of talking about it. But before I get into the actual, let's say, call them apologetics of it, when I watched that debate between Jeff Kassman, who was defending the Society of St. Pius X and did a wonderful job, and the other fella, I believe his last name is Bartel. I think it's Andrew Bartel. I was struck by the fact that there are still lay people who will spread these ideas that are nothing more than private opinion. Nothing more than their private opinion. And spread them as if they're reasons why people should judge an entire group of people and priests. I don't understand it. And when we're looking to whose opinion matters on the SSPX, there are two men that we should look to, two holy bishops and one cardinal. Cardinal Gagnon was a wonderful cardinal of the Catholic Church. If you want to know more about him, you should read Father Murr's recent book, Murder in the 33rd Degree. Cardinal Gagnon was chosen by Pope Paul VI and his Deputy Secretary of State to do the investigation into the Roman Curia to find out who all the Freemasons were. He was the most trusted man in Rome. He spent 3 years on that assignment. He knows virtually every single thing there could be to know about the men like Archbishop Annibale Bonini, Cardinal Villot, the death of John Paul I, and so on and so forth. There's a 300 or 400 page dossier sitting in the Vatican that's never been revealed. Anyway, he was sent to investigate as the papal visitor to the seminary of the SSPX in 1988. He went and he spent about a month with Marcel Lefebvre and his priests. And he said Marcel Lefebvre was a treasure of the church. Basically said he was a saint and that the SSPX needed to hold him tight because he was so special. And he also said there is no possible reason that the Society of St. Pius X should not have a normal canonical status within the church. It was just nonsense that it was happening that way. Then in 2015, none other than Bishop Athanasius Schneider was sent to do a visitation of the Society of St. Pius X. And he came back and said the same thing. They're Catholic. They're Roman Catholics. No more, no less. And they should be normalized completely. This is ridiculous. And in fact, Cardinal Gagnon actually said, and I know this for a fact because I'm lucky to be friends with one of his personal friends who's still alive. And he said, more than one occasion, Cardinal Gagnon said, the seminary of the SSPX should be the model for all seminaries of the Latin Rite on earth. Those two men have opinions that matter. These lay people who get on these podcasts, and I'm one of them, but I don't have my own opinions. That's my point. When people get on their podcasts or their YouTube shows and they say things like, well, I'm concerned with the SSPX because of reasons X, Y, and Z, with all due respect, Cardinal Gagnon was not concerned. And Bishop Schneider is not concerned. So your opinion means about as much as the information in a fortune cookie. When people like this Andrew Bartel fella on Matt Fradd's show say things like, well, there's like this sickness. He literally said this thing like there's a disease, there's a sickness that's contagious, a sickness of schism in the Society of St. Pius X and the faithful that attend. I don't know how you get to the point where you have so much contempt for a group of people and holy priests that you would speak in such a way. And I don't know why you would think your opinion matters more than that of two of the holiest bishops we've had in the church in the last 50 years, who actually were sent to do the job and did it. Their opinion matters. No one else's really does. So I'm not going to give my opinion about the SSPX in this video. Instead, I'm going to go through some information here. I'm not going to read every single thing that I'm going to share with you here. I'm just going to sort of scroll through this a little bit. And so this is a document that I wrote. It's called Everything That You've Been Told About the SSPX is Wrong. And there are some major bullet points. I'll find a place to maybe copy and paste this or something. I don't know. But here it is, so you can actually see it. Okay. So, first thing, is the SSPX in schism? No, the SSPX is not in schism. This was confirmed by Edward Cardinal Cassidy. He was the president, is the president emeritus of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. What does that mean? It means his job is trying to get the different Christian groups that are not Catholic to come to some sort of union with the Catholic Church. So he looks to the Lutherans and so on and so forth. And he said, I would point out at once that the directory on ecumenism is not concerned with the Society of St. Pius X. The situation of the members of the society is an internal matter of the Catholic Church. The society is not another church or ecclesial community in the meaning used in the directory. And if you'll see there, that date is 1994. 6 years after I was born and 6 years after the consecrations of the four bishops. They're not in schism, and that was known early as 1994. If you're in schism, you're not in the Catholic Church. If the man in charge with dealing with non-Catholic groups says that does not apply to the SSPX, it is what it is. In fact, even if the excommunication of their four bishops in 1988 was taken at face value, that has been authoritatively made null and void. Moreover, those excommunications never applied to the hundreds of priests in the society or to the faithful who receive their sacraments. In fact, you can spend all of your time trying to find a single canonical piece of evidence that says that the priests of the SSPX are in or have ever been in schism, and you will probably have more luck finding the Holy Grail. It doesn't exist. The excommunication of the four bishops, goodness gracious, this person in the chat here just shows. Oh, goodness. Sorry about this crazy person in the chat. Is that coming through there still? I'm sorry. That's just disturbing. Anyway. The excommunication of the four bishops consecrated by Marcel Lefebvre on June 30th, 1988, which had been declared by the Congregation for Bishops in a decree in July 1st, 1988, and which the Society of St. Pius X has always contested, was withdrawn. So what does this mean? It means that the idea that the bishops of the SSPX were excommunicated, that Marcel Lefebvre was excommunicated, that that there is some sort of penalty that still applies to the bishops. That was actually withdrawn in 2009, and this came out of the congregation invested with the power to make these statements. And it said, on the basis of the powers expressly granted to me by the Holy Father Pope Benedict XVI, by virtue of the present decree, I remit the penalty of excommunication incurred by Bishops Bernard Fillet, Bishop Malloray, Bishop Williamson, Bishop Galaretta, and declared by this congregation in 1988. At the same time, I declare that as of today's date, the decree issued at that time no longer has juridical effect. What does that mean? It means that the penalties declared in 1988, whether or not you believe they were valid or not, we'll talk about that in a different show. I can't talk about it today. That was rescinded in 2009. We're now in 2022, 13 years ago. It's no longer a penalty, it doesn't exist. Say what you will, but that's sort of the same thing as if it's kind of like if a judge comes back and says, yeah, there was a ruling that came down a long time ago, but this ruling no longer exists. I'm speaking on behalf of the law. And that's what happened. There's more that we could say about that, but it's pretty clear that it was said as early as 1994 that the SSPX were in the Catholic Church, therefore not in schism. And as recent as 2009, under Pope Benedict XVI, it was made clear that the penalties against the SSPX no longer have any juridical effect. So whatever you may think about the penalties themselves, if you're arguing that they're in schism, you're saying things that the church doesn't say and hasn't said for a long time, and has officially, even if you're talking about them as excommunicated, you're saying things that are not in fact true. So you're either speaking out of ignorance or you're speaking out of malice, and that's just wrong. Okay, now, that being said, can you attend Mass? Actually, I should say this as well. In 2007, Cardinal Hoyos stated the SSPX priests and adherents are not schismatics. And he said that the priests and faithful of the society have not been excommunicated. Anyone who says anyone who attends the SSPX is a schismatic is just speaking nonsense. Anyway, can you attend Mass at an SSPX chapel in good conscience? This has been known as well since 1996. Monsignor Camille Pearl, Secretary of the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei. Well, that commission has been absorbed by the CDF, but what is that? That's the group that was established in the church to govern these traditional communities, including the SSPX. In 1996, he put a letter out and repeated this also in another protocol, which is an answer to a question. And he said, in the strict sense, you may fulfill your Sunday obligation by attending a Mass celebrated by a priest of the Society of St. Pius X. If your intention is simply to participate in Mass according to the 1962 Missal for the sake of devotion, this would not be a sin. It would seem that a modest contribution to the collection at Mass could be justified. So as early as 1996, what we see is the man in charge of putting out these communications, and that's his job. So he's the man. It doesn't have to be the Pope. It doesn't have to be a cardinal. It just has to be the man whose job it is to do so. And he said, yes, you can go there for Mass. Yes, it's not a sin. Also, you can tithe. So you can keep them afloat by paying for them, and you can attend them as often as you want, I would assume. So basically, yes, you can be a parishioner at the SSPX. There's a part here too. It says, if your intention is simply to participate in Mass according to the 1962 Missal for the sake of devotion, this would not be a sin. I want to break this down. I myself am not a Thomist. I don't personally have some sort of background in St. Thomas Aquinas. It's not like I'm some sort of long-standing Thomistic scholar. But one of the things that I've done is I've studied enough Thomism to know that there's a reason why, since Thomas Aquinas was around, that his language and his philosophical terms have been adopted as a way of speaking about the church and ecclesial matters, at least in the West, in the Western church, and the Latin church. So we see when it talks about if your intention is simply to participate in Mass according to the 1962 Missal, this would not be a sin. Well, here's the thing. What is the Mass? The Mass is the Holy Sacrifice. Okay? The Mass is the Holy Sacrifice at Calgary, Calgary, Alberta, at Calvary. So the Mass is good. When the Mass takes place, if it's valid, it's good. It's the Eucharist, it's the consecration, it's the liturgy, it's a good thing. The things that would make the Mass bad, would be sinful activities surrounded with this Mass. I'm going to just 1 second here, guys. I'm going to see if I can disable this chat. I don't actually have sadly, I don't have a mod. I keep pressing block on these people. I apologize. I do apologize for that. I'm sorry that that's happening. I don't know how to turn that off. Anyway, so keep reporting them if you can, unless you want me to just turn off the chat. But in any case, the Mass is a good thing. There is nothing bad about the Mass in and of itself. The only thing that could make it bad is if you do bad things. So if it's schismatic, if it's done for satanic purposes, whatever. There could be a lot of reasons why performing a consecration in the wrong setting could be a bad thing. But if the church says it's not a sin, then that means that going to that Mass is good. It's just not a sin. So if you go to Mass and it's not sinful, then it's just going to Mass, and Mass is good. I mean, this is very simple. The church has said that you can go to Mass, the SSPX, and that it's not a sin to do so. No more, no less. That should probably be enough. Okay, so what about this? People have said, well, they're not in schism, but aren't they schismatic? Well, to infer that a group of Catholics are schismatic because they have an attitude that reflects schism, this is in fact casting a judgment. CSSML says, we can handle it, just ignore that nonsense. Okay. Again, I'm so sorry. Someone said in the chat that the devil hates the SSPX. I think that's true by this weird nonsense that's showing up in the chat. Anyway, to infer that a group of Catholics are schismatic because they have an attitude that reflects schism is really just judgment. And if it's not well-founded judgment, then it might be rash judgment, which is a sin. It's casting judgment on the interior life of every single person in a group. And as disciples of Christ, we should not do that. Someone says denying Pope Francis is not schismatic. Well, the SSPX does not deny Pope Francis, so I don't know what that is. Anyway, in this case, the objective external act is schism, if we're talking about that, and the proper church authority has judged that the SSPX are not in schism. None of us should then postulate or presume to judge the internal attitude of this or that person in that group, let alone the entire group at large. Rather, we should deal with fellow Catholics, as St. Thomas Aquinas so eloquently says, and he says, quote, unless we have evident indication of a person's wickedness, we ought to deem him good by interpreting for the best whatever is doubtful about him. So that's what Thomas Aquinas says. Unless somebody has been judged to be in schism, they're not. For us to go around and say, well, I think that they make me feel schismy. Well, that's great, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. What about this idea that the SSPX is not in full communion? I've heard this 1,000 times. I've heard, well, I was told they're not in full communion with Rome. I see Adam's talking about someone in the chat. Very good. Okay. Well, being in full communion or being in communion or being out of communion, i.e. excommunicated, refer to one's reception of the sacraments. Sometimes I think that for people, this idea of being in communion is like a matter of having a certain amount of points. I want to know when people say the SSPX are not in communion or not in full communion, what on earth does it even mean? Like if you're in full communion, does that mean that you get like 100 communion points? But if you're in partial communion, do you get like 75 points? Do you get 80 points? I mean, how many communion points does the SSPX have? I've never been able to get an answer to this. Well, they're not in full communion. How much communion are they in? Well, yeah, James Martin, his parish is in full communion, sure. He gets 100% communion points. But the SSPX, they're not in full communion. They only get like 92. Well, on a good day, they might get 96. But when they're acting all anti-novus ordo-y, they probably only get like 86 communion points. So they're in a pretty good communion, but not a full communion. It's absurd. When you follow it through, it's absolutely insane. The word communion means something. You are in communion. You communicate in the sense of attending Holy Communion with the church, or you don't. It's very simple. If somebody participates and receives the sacraments, this is in the common blessings of an ecclesiastical society, okay? As the holy sacrifice of the Mass and reception of Holy Communion holds such an essential and normative place in Catholic life, this concept stems from the word communion. Thus, one who is in communion may receive Holy Communion, whereas one who is out of or excommunion may not. This is pretty simple. Like schism, this is binary. It's either yes or no. It does not permit degrees or percentage points or, levels. Okay. No one is in partial communion any more than someone is partially pregnant or partially married. Full communion and partial communion are novel terms popularized after the Second Vatican Council. Nowhere can these terms be found in the traditional teachings of the church fathers, popes, ecumenical councils, doctors of the church, or saints of the first 19 centuries of Catholic teaching. So even if we were to say that there is some reality to this idea of having all of the communion points, we would have to interpret this in light of the tradition of the church. And when we look at the tradition of the church, we don't find these things. That's it. So is the SSPX in full communion? Well, the church has said for 30 years, longer than that, you can go to the SSPX for Mass. You can communicate at the SSPX. Therefore, the communion is there. Now, what about, okay, I've heard this before, but they aren't truly in union with Rome. I've actually heard this. One time I was talking to a vicar of a diocese, a major Canadian diocese, actually. And I sat down with this gentleman for an hour and a half. It was the strangest meeting I've ever had in my life. I was told in this meeting that you could contracept. That was not against Catholic teaching, but that the SSPX were not in union with the church because they don't accept all of the magisterium. And this man will probably be a bishop one day, so that just tells you something. He's been in charge of a major seminary as well. In any case, I've heard this objection. So we're going to have to ask for a clearer definition of terms. To say that someone's in union with the church, this seems a very imprecise manner of speaking, which I think we would do well to avoid. After all, what does it mean to be truly in union with Rome, especially in a time of grave crisis? Think about that for a second. If being in union with Rome is understood as it has always been understood by the Catholic Church, and as it is enumerated in the Catechism of the Council of Trent, which was promulgated by Pope St. Pius V, namely that one accepts all of the de fide teachings of the Church with divine and Catholic faith, administers the same sacraments, and accepts the legitimate authorities of the Church, i.e. popes and bishops, accepts, doesn't mean obeys in all circumstances, doesn't mean accepts all things that they do, but says, yes, they're the Pope. He's the Pope. Yes, they're the bishops. If you accept that, then this is what it means to be in union with Rome. Because that's what it means to be in the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. If you're in the Roman Catholic Church and you accept the things that the Roman Catholic Church expects of you, then you're in union with the Roman Catholic Church. Again, this is not like this is just like this partial communion thing. The SSPX priests, the priests of the SSPX, the bishops of the SSPX are Roman Catholic by baptism. They are Roman Catholic priests by ordination. They offer Roman Catholic sacraments as priests of Jesus Christ. And they are a society of apostolic life that was erected in the Roman Catholic Church by a Roman Catholic bishop. And they believe the Roman Catholic faith. And they have faculties from the Roman Catholic Pope. Should they walk around with a badge on? I'm serious. I asked this to this vicar once. I said, should they wear a badge? Should they wear a badge that says, no, guys, I promise I'm really in union. I'm so union today with the church. This is nonsense. This is absolutely nonsense. Now, all well and good. A lot of people will admit this stuff and they'll say, yeah, but the SSPX, it does have an irregular canonical status. Sure, they do have an irregular canonical status. We live in a time where the German bishops have a regular canonical status when they're blessing same-sex civil unions on the footsteps of the church, where Father James Martin is a Roman Catholic priest in good standing, where demon worship ceremonies take place in Rome. All of those people have regular canonical statuses. But the priests of the SSPX are in an irregular status. You know what? To be honest, I think being said you're irregular in this time is probably a badge of honor. It's clear that attendance at their mass constitutes no sin, and that Catholics may even tithe in good conscience. Yet, on the other hand, Pope Benedict said in 2009 that the ministers of the SSPX have no canonical status in the church and its ministers cannot legitimately exercise any ministry. People will point to that. The problem is that's not true anymore. In fact, in the same year, and this is to show you the confusion here, Pope Benedict is a good pope. I don't think he's still pope. I don't mean that. No one screen cap that or say Kennedy said Pope Benedict is a good pope. He's a Beni Plenist. I don't believe Benedict's still the pope. I'm saying he was a good pope. And I guess he's a good pope emeritus. In 2009, Pope Benedict put out a letter saying in the same year, Pope Benedict had one of his underlings from the relevant congregation put out a letter saying all of the penalties leveled against the SSPX in 1988 are no longer binding and no longer have juridical effect. Then he put out a letter saying, oh, by the way, they don't actually have any legitimate ministry in the church. Then in 2009, in the spring, this is a true story. This has been verified by Bishop Fillet. In the spring of 2009, the SSPX was asked to move their ordinations of priests out of the German jurisdiction, and they complied. As a result, the SSPX had a strange and indisputable 2-week, quote-unquote, legal status in the church that lasted until Easter of that year. So for 2 weeks, Pope Benedict said, you are totally legit and legal if you just move your ordinations across the border. So the German bishops don't get upset. Can't take off those German bishops because they're so in union with the Pope. Furthermore, there are currently dozens of dioceses around the world, probably hundreds at this point, that utilize the SSPX to facilitate traditional Latin Mass, wedding ceremonies. Their confessions have long been recognized by Rome. And under Pope Francis, this was in 2017, I think. Oh, no, 2018? I'll get the date wrong. Anyway, the SSPX under Francis has authority to ordain Catholic priests in any diocese in the world, and they don't even need the consent of the local bishop. So all of these activities constitute legitimate ministries, which would indicate that Pope Benedict's 2009 statement that they don't have a legitimate ministry, that's not even true. Since the Vatican's own official acts run contrary to it, that statement appears to be erroneous and was perhaps written out of political concerns. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when someone says the SSPX has an irregular status in the church, yeah, what on earth is regular about any of this? To be irregular in a time like this, I mean, I guess if you're a faithful Catholic priest, you're irregular. So irregular. Also, this idea of having an irregular canonical status, again, is not found in tradition. We just live in an age of confusion, and people just make things more confusing by throwing around confusing terms. Now, what about jurisdiction? This is another area where people will say, well, the SSPX doesn't have any jurisdiction. Well, that's not true anymore anyway. But it's never really been true. So I'll read this carefully here because this is important. So jurisdiction normally comes from a superior or local ordinary, as understood by canon law. However, it is not the canonical procedure that confers the power to absolve sins or to witness a marriage, but instead the power of orders through a valid priestly ordination. So, for example, Canon 1335 of the New Code of Canon Law states that a member of the faithful could even approach a penalized or suspended priest without normal jurisdiction for any sacrament as long as there is a just cause. Now, it doesn't define what just cause is. So I had one person say to me, they said, Kennedy, I've got good traditional priests. Oh, no. Yeah, good traditional priests near me. I can't remember if they were the FSSP or Christ the King. I'm not saying this to get in any of these turf wars. They just is what they told me. But he said, I don't like the advice that the one priest is giving my wife in the confessional. I don't know what it was. That was what he said to me. So anyway, this is just a story I'm telling. Don't shoot the messenger. And he said, but there's an SSPX across town, and I think that priest is a better confessor. And he said, could I, but I don't know about this jurisdiction thing. Can I go to that priest? And I said, well, Canon 1335 says, Canon 1335 says, you can go to any priest, even if he's suspended, as long as you have a just cause. And he said, well, what is my just cause? And I said, well, would you like your wife to go to heaven? And he laughed and he said, yeah, I'd like my wife to go to heaven. I said, would you like to go to heaven? And I said, I'm not telling you what to do, but there is no more just cause to seek out the sacraments of a priest than to save your soul. That's kind of the point. Sarmad, whoever this guy is, just J.K. Sarmad. He says, make Matthew Kassab the mod. I have literally never done one of these restream live streams. So I will figure out how to do the mod thing, and I'll make it happen. So anyway, okay. But not today. So whether or not anyone even has legitimate jurisdiction is in a recognized sense, canon law gives us this stipulation. And it says, if a censure prohibits the celebration of sacraments or the blessing of sacramentals or the placing of an act of governance, the prohibition is suspended whenever it is necessary to care for the faithful in danger of death. If a late sententia censure has not been declared, the prohibition is also suspended whenever a member of the faithful requests sacraments or sacramental, or a sacrament or sacramental or an act of governance. A person is permitted to request these for any just cause. Okay. None of the members of the SSPX are under any penalties. I mean, aside from, I don't know about there's almost 800 priests. Maybe one of them is under suspension for some, I don't know. I'm just saying this is not like the decision of the church. They're not, de facto suspended or anything like that. So approaching them for a just cause is just that. Now, one of the sacraments that people worry about is the sacrament of marriage. And although in 2017, this was made clear that the SSPX priest could actually be used by the local bishop for doing the marriage. Now, but even if this didn't happen, Canon 1116, it says, if a person competent to assist according to the norm of law cannot be present or approached without grave inconvenience, those who intend to enter into a true marriage can contract it validly and licitly before witnesses only. What does this mean? It means if there's a grave impediment and you can't find a Catholic priest in the normal sense to do your wedding, you actually don't even have to have a priest there. It can be, as it says, before witnesses only. Okay. So one of them is in danger of death. And one of the other one is outside of the danger of death, provided that it is prudently foreseen that the situation will continue for a month. Okay, so what does this mean? So if there is no danger of death, it means, but there's something else that's something else that's getting in the way of you getting married that will continue for a month. You see, the reason why the church wants us to be married, there's lots of reasons. But one of them is because when you're married, you aren't guilty of the sin of fornication. It's kind of a big deal. Pretty much every diocese on earth will make you go through some sort of marriage preparation. I think in the States, it's called pre-Cana. It can take 6 months to get your date where you actually go to this thing. And these can be good. There are good marriage prep courses, and that's great. I mean, if that happens, God be praised. But it's often the case that if you were to, and I know this, if you were to approach your local diocese or your parish or whatever and say, we would like to get married, they'll say, well, you have to have a meeting with Father so-and-so, and then you have to attend a course. And then in 4 months, you're going to go to the marriage prep thing, or you're going to have to do, some places make you do one thing every 2 weeks for like 6 months. Like it's crazy. It's crazy the stuff you have to go through to get married. They make it really hard to get married. Well, canon law says if something gets in the way of you getting married for more than a month, you literally can get married with just other people present, not even a priest. Why? Because the actual sacrament of marriage is done by the vows of the people. The priest celebrates the mass and he confers certain blessings. So it says in either case, if some other priest or deacon, so the normal means is going to your parish priest, but your diocese says it's going to take you 8 months before you can even get a marriage date. Some other priest, that could include a priest of the SSPX. If some other priest or deacon can be present and is available, he must be called and be present at the celebration of the marriage together with the witnesses without prejudice to the validity of marriage before witnesses only. Okay, so what the saying is, if you can't get married within a month because of some grave inconvenience, but you do know of some other priest that can be there, then you're actually obliged to find that person. So if you can't get married because the bishop says you have to have a 6 month waiting list and have 6 more months of probably, tempting you to fornication, which will damn your soul, and you know of a priest or a deacon who is around who can actually witness your marriage, you're actually obliged and encouraged to go find that person. The SSPX has been doing this for the whole time. So even before it was said that the SSPX marriages were recognized in validity or jurisdiction, it was already there. Okay. Now, what about the state of necessity? So the state of necessity is actually recognized in Canon 1324. Now, the law does not define what a state of necessity would be in all cases. It would be impossible to define that. So I think that that's wise. For example, Canon 844 even allows for Catholics to attend Mass or confession with an Orthodox priest if no Catholic parish is present in a given location. Implicit in this law is the fact that their sacraments are valid, although they are illicit, and these can be a means of salvation. What this means is you need to go to confession. You're in Russia. There are no Catholic churches around. You find an Ortho-Bro Russian priest. He hears your confession. You are doing this because you need the sacrament. He's a valid priest. It's a valid confession. Your soul is saved for the time being until you commit another mortal sin. Please don't do that. Therefore, in a state of necessity, due to a lack of a Catholic Mass, the Orthodox option would suffice, and the Church herself directly supplies or recognizes the relevant jurisdiction. So there's a state of necessity implied in Canon 1324 and Canon 844. The same canon even explicitly states that physical or moral impossibility is sufficient. is sufficient cause for a Catholic to approach the sacraments of those who are recognized as not being in the Catholic Church. Now, this term here, moral impossibility, is really important. So, moral impossibility is an intriguing inclusion. And this is in canon law. This isn't, again, these are not my opinions. These are just the things that the church says. Moral impossibility. What does this mean? This is a philosophical term. For one, it could mean morally impossible, meaning, it would be in good conscience, you couldn't do it. It would feel immoral. So it says, Canon 844 says, if you cannot for physical impossibility, attend a Catholic Mass with a Catholic priest, or moral impossibility. So physical is pretty easy. It's like it's a snowstorm and you can't get to a Catholic priest, but there's an Orthodox priest across the street. You've committed a mortal sin and you don't want to go to hell. That's physical impossibility. It gives you the justification to go there. Or, again, you're in a country with no Catholic priests or something. But what is moral impossibility? Moral impossibility means a couple things. One, Father James Martin is visiting your parish. For some reason, it's the only parish within like 3-hour drive. And you are not going to go to that Mass for obvious reasons. You don't really feel like participating in the offending of God that day, which I think is reasonable. That's moral impossibility. In addition, though, the idea of moral impossibility actually refers to this idea of moral certainty. So what is moral certainty or moral certitude? Well, there's various types of certitude when we speak philosophically. When you have metaphysical certainty, this is like saying, I know 2 + 2 is 4, because in all cases, it's always that way. You can, you can bet that you can bet the farm on that. It's just going to be 4. You have metaphysical certainty. But what is moral certainty? Well, let's give you an example. If you have a group of 5 boys who just got back from a 2.5-hour football practice, and you put a large steaming hot pepperoni pizza in a room and lock the door, I would bet my mortgage that they would have that pizza gone within 10 minutes. I have moral certainty that there is no possible way, assuming they don't have any allergies or something. I have moral certainty that they would eat that pizza. And I would literally bet everything I have if that was possible, because that would be the easiest bet ever. So moral impossibility can refer to this idea that you believe it would be immoral for you to attend a certain thing, but that would also be you believe that you have moral certainty that there's a reason why you can't. So if somebody makes the decision to not attend a Catholic Mass recognized by the normal setting of the normal juridical settings, then their reasons will be their own. If they say, I'm not going to attend the Novus Ordo because I have moral certainty that I'm going to see sacrilege or hear heresy at some point, that's the judgment they've made based off of the things that they've assessed, and that's judgment is their own. You see where I'm going with this? So if the church allows us to approach the Orthodox for reasons of moral impossibility, it should be a no-brainer that when people make decisions of conscience to go to the SSPX, even if there's another church around, that those reasons are their own and they have to be judged on an individual basis. And no one can make those decisions but the person who's making them. Okay, that's everything that I wanted to go through as far as the meat and potatoes. None of those things are my opinion. Those are just simply the facts. I've got 10 minutes. Are there any questions from people in the chat who would like answered about the SSPX? If you want, put them in there. And yes, I'm going to figure out a moderator. This is the first time that I've gone live with this new service, and I'm happy about it. We had to get all this technology worked out. But yeah, Anybody have any questions? If not, I'll sign off in a couple minutes here. If you're just joining us now, one of the reasons why I felt the need to do this episode was because of a lot of the videos that people have been doing about the SSPX for a long time. And, I should just say you're welcome. You're welcome, Saint Martin, 1773. I think I see all the time on Meaning a Catholic. CCSSML says, why is the SSPX so based? Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just maybe they're I don't know, because Marcel Lefebvre was old school French. I don't know. He had a good beard when he was in Africa. That probably helps as well. Someone said, I've heard some priests in the SSPX recommend not going to Novus Ordo and even FSSP masses rivalry. What's the official policy of the SSPX? I don't know if there's an official policy, like they have to like sign something. But yes, SSPX across the board will recommend, generally speaking, not to go to the Novus Ordo. I recommend not going to the Novus Ordo. Cardinal Ottaviani, who was the head of the Holy Office, who, that's the head of doctrine on earth. Talk about an important man. They did a study on the SSPX, or on the new mass in 1969, and not the clown mass, but like the actual mass, just the what everyone calls the Reverent Novus Ordo, just the text of the mass. And he said it imbibed a Protestant spirit, essentially. That was called the Ottaviani intervention. So if you believe Protestantism is a heresy, then you would want to stay away from something that could possibly imbibe that spirit. So yeah, when they say to avoid the Novus Ordo mass, I mean, there are good reasons for that. Now, as far as the FSSP is concerned, I don't think there's an official policy on what traditional masses you should go to, which ones you shouldn't. I don't think so. You might, I have heard from people, this is just hearsay, this is not gospel truth. I have heard from people that have attended the FSSP in cities where there's also an SSPX, that sometimes the FSSP will, I know it was out west in Canada, I think it was in Calgary. The FSSP was essentially preaching against going to the SSPX. So I don't know. Can't speak to that. Someone asked, let's see here. What further reading? I would recommend, I'll have to knock over my stack of books here. Read the biography of Marcel Lefebvre. It's a wonderful read. And I would also say, read Michael Davies' works, Apologia pro Lefebvre, Apologia pro Marcel Lefebvre. Those are wonderful. So Anne Clark says, I'm old. Is based good? Oh, yes. Based is very good. La Reconquista says, can you please explain the SSPX teaching about not to attend the Novus Ordo Mass? Oh, I just did that. So there you go. Doesn't this go against, if they stay home, doesn't this go against Sunday obligation? Well, so this is a longer answer. I'll try to distill it. As far as I can understand, so there's a divine law, which is what you have, is that you have to sanctify Sunday, keep the Lord's Day holy. The way that the church has given us the normal means of fulfilling that is by Sunday obligation. But there are reasons why we can't go to Sunday Mass sometimes, and we're not in sin for doing so. So, for example, if we have children who are sick, we have to care for them. We have to work for a grave reason. I know if you're a surgeon or a doctor, and once a month you have to do a Sunday shift or something like that. There are reasons why you can't attend Mass. You're supposed to go to Mass as soon as possible after that, have a grave reason, whatever. Okay, fine. Again, if you have a moral certainty that there are reasons of conscience that you can't attend because of things that you believe that will come to pass, then that's a decision you have to make. But no matter what decision you make, you have to sanctify the day. sometimes people will say, sometimes people will go to a mass and just sort of kneel at the back and pray the rosary. I don't know. That's something you'll have to talk to somebody specifically about that in your situation. This guy, some guy named Sarmad, he says, did the society recently meet with the Holy Father? I actually don't know if they did. I don't know. KJ Hammer says, Marcel Lefebvre has already been vindicated. No more needs to be said. Very good. Are the FSSP considered apostates to the SSPX? No. What if the SSPX, what if your diocesan bishop says you cannot attend the SSPX? Then you should tell your diocesan bishop to obey the Pope. Sorry. All right. I think that's it. Any other questions? I've got 4 minutes. In fact, just this question here from Joel. I one time, this is one of the I'm going to do another video on why I believe the resistance to the SSPX is diabolical. And I mean that from a technical sense. I'm not saying that people are possessed who don't like the SSPX, but I mean, there are things that have been strange. I was told by one priest who was a good man that the SSPX were like the Lutheran Church. They didn't even have sacraments. I was told by another one who celebrated the traditional mass that the SSPX were in full schism like the Orthodox. This was in a period of about 2 months of each other. I was told by another priest who called himself a traditional priest. And he said the SSPX is not in schism, but they're not in union with Rome. I showed him the information that said they were from the Vatican website, and he said that's not the opinion of our diocese. Okay. I was told by the vicar of a major diocese in Canada that you could not attend the SSPX under any circumstances, even if there were no other sacraments present. I was told by a catechist, she said that the SSPX don't believe there's been a pope since St. Pius X. That's why they're called the SSPX. The opinions on the SSPX are nuts. I'm sorry, they're just crazy. Says, do you know how the FSSP explain ecumenism and religious liberty or things in Vatican II? Well, I don't know. Vatican II is really big. 99% of it's fine. I mean, the SSPX follows more of Vatican II than most. The SSPX probably follows more of Vatican II than anybody on earth because like 95% of it is just kind of repetition. They just have questions about that 5% that is questionable. Everyone else follows the 5% that's questionable, but not the 95%. Opinion on Bishop Williamson. Bishop Williamson says a lot of great stuff. I don't know him. Although I will say sometimes I think that he has a lot of personal opinions about things that I think people might confuse as dogma. And the SSPX resistance, I don't like the SSPX resistance personally. I'm not saying that I think they're schismatic. I just don't like the SSPX resistance. I get the feeling from the resistance that it's a position of being against something rather than for something. The Society of St. Pius X is not an act of rebellion any more than divine faith is an act of rebellion. Maybe it's an act of rebellion against Satan, but it's not an act of rebellion against the church. It's an act of rebellion against error, if that makes sense. So I don't like the resistance position, although I understand how people get there. Sarmad says, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Is it true that the Byzantine Divine Liturgy is greater than the Latin Mass? I know Sarmad, so yes, he's being funny. He will tell you that jokingly, Jesus said the Divine Liturgy. Bishop Mallory says the noble sort of bishops, priests, and most sacraments are therefore invalid. I don't think that's true. That he would say that therefore invalid. I don't think so. Jennifer says, didn't you change 70% of the mass? I didn't change anything. I'm not a priest. Anyway, The question's now, what did Father Hardin say about the SSPX? I don't know. But I do have it on good authority that the letter purported to have been by Bishop Fulton Sheen saying that you shouldn't attend the SSPX. I'm actually pretty certain that was a fake. So that's interesting. I'm going to write an article on that someday. How could one discern a vocation with the SSPX brothers in Canada? Oh, well, if you're interested in that, click the link in the description for the Kennedy Report, my website. There's like a contact us there, and you can email me, and I will get you in touch with somebody if you'd like. Are you in the third order of the society? So I am a postulant. I'm reluctant to talk about it because I don't want to pretend that I'm not as wretched of a sinner as I am, but I am a postulant in the society. In the third order. A third order is like any third order. It's for lay people to sanctify their life. So there's just a rule of life and things like that. You make certain, not vows because you're not a cleric, but you make sort of pledges and promises. So if you're interested in joining the third order, and in fact, I don't think you technically have to. I might be wrong on this, so please correct me, someone, if they seem to have made an error. But it says in the rules of the third order that you're supposed to attend the traditional mass or a traditional mass rather than the Novus Ordo, but it doesn't say that you have to attend the SSPX all the time. I don't know if I'm wrong on that, but that's what my interpretation is. So I think people that, even if you didn't have a SSPX with you like every week or something like that, maybe you could still join. I don't know. I don't know how that worked. That's just my opinion. My favorite color, red. Yep. Red, like the colors of the, not just because of the SSPX logo. All right. Wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a blast. I'm going to find a way to get a mod for the next chat. And I'm going to try my best here to have a nice outro video. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope this has been helpful. Please share this episode around with people who have questions about the SSPX. You can reach me through my website. It's in the chat. If you've enjoyed this, I'm going to start trying to do live streams more. I'm going to open up the super chats as well. I'm just getting used to this stuff. I'm going to be at the March for Life. I'm going to be driving a long way here. It's about, I live in southwestern Ontario. It's going to take me about 8 hours or so to drive to Ottawa. Please pray for my safe travels. In addition, you're welcome, Mr. Simpson. Damn Simpson. Oh, goodness, these stupid people in the chat. Not you. In addition, pray for my wife. We're expecting a child, and it'd be great if you could pray for us. So thank you, everybody. And click the link in the description. Find out how you can help us to support us. Every little bit helps to keep this going. I do have a full-time job with LifeSite News, so I have to do this outside of my regular work hours, which is obviously something that takes up a lot of time. So thank you, everyone, for joining me. Until next time, I'm Kennedy Hall. God bless.